You ever sit in a kickoff meeting and think, something's missing here? You're not just being paranoid. You're missing the missing piece, usually for most organizations, is risk. And using just one technique to find it, that's like bringing a wrench to a sword fight. We don't have a crystal ball. There's no oracle, no Doctor Strange scanning the infinite timelines. But we do have tools. Risk management is our way of predicting what could go wrong and planning it before it actually does. And we call this risk identification. That's the process of spotting uncertainties that could impact your project both negatively and positively over time. And this isn't magic. It's a legit technique that if you apply to your projects, you can become effective at understanding and identifying risks in your project. And today, I'm going to give you 7 tested methods straight from the PMBOK and the PMI-RMP study materials. So let's go. Most PMs know they have to identify risks, but here's where they go wrong. They only use one method, which usually looks a lot and smells a lot like brainstorming. It's fast, it's familiar, and it's usually incomplete. If you want to lead risk management like a professional, you need to stack your tools, cover those blind spots, and break some of the other tools into your processes, which I'm going to show you some other tools here today. First things first, we do have to cover brainstorming because it is a popular and useful technique, but it can't be the one-stop shop when it comes to managing your risks. Brainstorming is the classic method. We've been using it since we were kids, trying to plan how we were going to do whatever we did as kids. It's all about being open-minded, no bad ideas, no judgment. You capture everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. Then you go ahead and group them together, prioritize, filter them out, and then you end up with a great list. But you do have to watch out for a thing called groupthink. This is the #1 way to destroy a good brainstorming session, allowing that one voice to take over and move the entire crowd in one direction. Groupthink is how you take a group of individuals and move them from critical thinking into consensus mode, which is completely against all fundamentals of brainstorming. And I read a study once that the larger the size of the group, the less valuable that the brainstorming session will become due to groupthink. So be aware of this before jumping into a 3-hour-long brainstorming session. Keep your group small. Keep the sessions engaged. One way to avoid groupthink in the way that this can happen in your brainstorming sessions is to jump into our next technique, the Delphi. Using the Delphi technique, we get expert insights, but we do it anonymously throughout the process. It's like brainstorming, but slower, and no one knows who the other persons are giving their ideas. This is usually great for those senior leaders who really can't make the normal session because they're busy with other things. Also, they're the ones that create the most susceptible way of developing groupthink. When my manager says that they have an idea, I usually am going to follow with it. You can also use this with those senior leaders to get a good strategic picture of your risks. So how do we do this? First, you just send them an email. Send me your risks. What are you thinking about? Maybe a questionnaire, however you want to do that piece. But the first part is you want to pull the information from them. Then you reflect, you refine, and you send out another questionnaire that has everything from the first round. And you work through these iterations to build consensus, get inputs on other risks, and figure out what they're thinking of all these different areas. You rinse, you repeat this until you get a good anonymous consensus. So why does this work? Because people will share their real concerns when they're not being watched or judged on what they're saying. Plus, when they give this anonymous feedback, they're more willing to be honest and upfront with you. While at the same time, as you're going through the iterations, I don't know who put this on the paper, but all I know is I want to either agree or disagree with them. So if it's my boss who put it on there, or if it's someone that works for me, at least I know that it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. So Delphi is all about being anonymous. Next, we have checklists. Checklists are powerful, especially for identifying risks, but dangerous, especially when we use these inappropriately. To work with checklists, all you really have to do is look through lessons learned, pull from past projects, or just grab a PMI checklist that sits out there. But remember, you need to adapt them. You need to expand them. Make them yours for your organization and your project. Put some thought behind the list. If you do that, your checklist is going to become a great resource and it's going to put you in a great position for identifying risks in your projects. Next on the list, we have SWOT. We've all heard of SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But have you used it as a risk tool? Remember, risks are threats and opportunities. So when you look at your weaknesses and threats within a SWOT analysis, you already have your negative risks. Then you're already looking at strengths and opportunities, which are positive risks. It's strategic and it's a simple process. Not much to go over here other than SWOT analysis helps you determine risks on both sides by looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Next, we have prompt lists. Using prompt lists like PESTLE and TCOP force you to scan the big picture. PESTLE stands for political, economic, technical, legal, environmental. So when you go through and you look at each one of these elements, it helps you catch risks that your gut might miss, especially for those external type risks. Use a prompt list to get that information from everybody before you start jumping in and refining them. So hopefully right now we're 5 techniques in and you're starting to see the interconnectivity of how these all work. Next on the list is one-on-one interviews. This is where you need to talk to your subject matter experts, those engineers, those end users, and give them some open-ended questions. What could go wrong with whatever we're working on? What assumptions are we making right now that you're wondering about? And then capture these. Develop themes across all those SMEs. And if the same risk pops up twice, it's probably real. And last but not least, assumption analysis. Every assumption is a hidden risk. Something like assumption around regulatory approval will come in 2 weeks. Sounds pretty simple, but what if it doesn't happen? Every assumption has an impact if it's wrong. So you need to validate them. You need to log them in your RAIDs. And you need to make sure that you look at them as a risk. So here's what this looks like when you put it into action. 1 risk from an assumption, 1 uncovered through a prompt list. You have 3 different techniques, 1 richer, smarter risk register. And don't just think you have to use these tools during identification. Remember, each tool can be worked out at different phases. During kickoff, maybe some interviews, do some SWOT analysis with your brainstorming. During plan, get out those prompt lists, get a checklist, go through a great assumption analysis. And if you're an agile team, you need to plug risk discovery into those retros in those sprint planning sessions. It's not always about what's the best technique. There probably isn't a best technique. It's about the best combination of techniques that work for your organization, your team, in the context of your project. If you're adaptive and know what works best for where you are, who you're working with, and what you're going to make risk management so much easier for your organization. So if you want to run some real world risk workshops using these techniques, then you got to check out my course on how to run a risk workshop. It gives you the techniques on how to use these, the scripts, the templates, the checklists, and the agendas of how you walk through a risk workshop. This is perfect for PMPs, RMPs, and anyone tired of thinking this risk isn't their job. Because if you lead projects, risk is your job. Check out the link in the description below to how to run a risk workshop. Risk management does not start with a spreadsheet. A risk register is only a document if you're not identifying risks the right way. And that all starts with better conversations, better leadership, better identification techniques. If you like what I'm talking about, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Therefore, you'll hear more information on project management, project risk management, and leadership. And share it with your team, especially if they think risk is just some extra paperwork. And make sure you leave a comment about your thoughts down on this topic, especially if any risk techniques that you specifically love to use. Stay proactive over reactive. The Bearded PM out.